Windblown Ideas. I design paper flowers, and I thought I would show you how to make my Peony Mini Bloom. I want to remake this one right here. This is my Ball Peony. This is made with 5 layers of petals. The SVG also comes with some mini blooms, and that's what these are. They're just made with 3 layers of petals. And I made these recently. This one I made first, and I didn't like how open it was, so I thought I would make it quite a bit tighter. And that's how I ended up with this here. And as for a mini bloom, I thought that was a much better look where it looks like it's just beginning to open up. So I thought I would show you how I remake this one, and I'll just do it tighter. And I'll also include coloring it with the PanPastel since it's just 3 layers. Hopefully that doesn't make too long of a live video. So I've got my 3 layers of petals, and I will color them with PanPastel. This is Permanent Red Extra Dark PanPastel with the Soft Tool sponge. And I use their colorless blender, and it makes such a difference in order to get the color that I really want. It's kind of a rich pinky, but it's a lot deeper than a pink. So just going with the tint of this, you don't get anywhere near the same color. And so I'll show you how to do that. You just take a little bit of color, doesn't take much at all, and then I pick up some of the blender. And what I do is I put the sponge flat on the petal, and the tip of it points towards the inside. And what happens is where the edges of the color that I picked up, they will blend on the paper. And so I get this nice blurred line, whereas if I came at it in the other direction, I would have a very distinct line on the edges. And so that's how I get a nice blurred edge. So let me try to go through and do these real quick. I love this color. And there's no need to seal the PanPastel. It stays put very well. I mean, if you just really swipe and put on a lot of color, then you might have some color would certainly come off if you rubbed up against something with it. But I mean, these, I've done nothing with these, and you can handle them, and I wouldn't, swipe it across a white shirt, but that color stays put, and I don't need to do anything to seal it. And then I flip this over, and I will put color on the other side, and practice with this the first time you do it, because you just need the tiniest bit of pigment, or you will end up with more color than you're looking for. And PanPastel is erasable. If you actually get it somewhere you don't want it, you can use an eraser. And every petal doesn't need to look exactly the same, so you can go through pretty quickly. So that's one layer that I've colored on both sides. And let's get these others done. I still have a few. I have most colors of PanPastel, but I've learned how much I like the extra darks when I tone them down with a colorless blender. So I think there's a few that I need to get that I want to experiment with. And this paper that I'm working on is, I think it's either 150 or 160 GSM. It's about 90 to 98 pound. This particular paper is Fabriano Tiziano. I don't really know how to say that. It's the color is called Banana, so it's just slightly more yellow than a cream. It looks really good with this color on it. And that is my preferred paper are the art papers that are that weight. They're very similar to cardstock. I like the colors that I can get, and they cut well. I'm the kind of person I like to find a material I love, and unless I have a compelling reason to try something else, I just stick with it, because if you have spent any time cutting things out on your Cricut, you know how infuriating it can be when things don't cut right. They can snag and tear, and it's very frustrating, or they leave a mess on your mat. These papers cut very cleanly, and I don't waste a lot of time and materials, which when I first started, there was a lot of that. These, I've got a little more on here than I would care for, but it's okay because I've picked up a little more. And what I can do is add a good bit more blender, and that really tones it right back down too. But to try to do it fast and talk at the same time, it isn't quite as meticulous as I might be if I wasn't trying to speed through this on a camera. But we only have one more side. Oh, we already have both sides. So it is all colored. So I will set these aside. And let's see, we'll make the center strip before we shape these. So on these, I do add just a tiny bit of color to the tips of the center strip. And I don't need to bother with the blender because I'm just adding a tiny little bit. So I can go through, oh, I guess I better get that on camera. I can go through several inches of it and then just pick up a little bit more color because I'm just wanting to add a little bit of color to the very ends, but it doesn't need to be precise at all. And then I'll go ahead and flip it over and color the other side. And then I'll shape the tips of the center strip and roll it up with a quilling tool. Ooh, I've already done all this without my glasses. Okay, now I can set that aside, and I will just use a wooden shaping stick. You can use a paintbrush handle, anything that you have on hand. And let me see if I can bring it up here. I just kind of go back and forth, only grabbing the tallest ones that stick up, and I bend them this way and that way so that when I roll it up, it just gives some nice organic shape to the centers. So they're not all standing straight up and they're not all like curled in one direction. I'm just wanting it to look nicely tousled. Okay, now I'll use the quilling tool. And there's a metal slot in here. Better put my glasses on. So you insert the end of it into the slot and roll it up. And I usually add a little dot of glue. It's not really necessary because this isn't not big enough to really get away from me, but it does. I should have cleared this before I started. Okay. So add just a little dot of glue and roll it up. And you try to keep it aligned at the bottom. You don't want to continue to add glue as you go, because if you do, it's permanently stuck wherever it usually doesn't roll up straight. So that creates a mess that's very hard to undo. And then I just add a dot of glue at the very end. Hold it for a second, and then I'll pop it off of the quilling tool. And it's not perfectly flat on the bottom, so I set it on the table and kind of give it a good smush with my thumb, and that flattens it out so that I've got a nice flat bottom. If that doesn't work, I take something sharp like these tweezers, and you can push it in towards the center and press down, and that will also bring your layers down so that they're flat. And then we'll just set that aside. Now, wipe this off. Now we can go ahead and shape the petals. Okay, get rid of that paper and get a shaping mat and a plastic quilling mold. Let's see, will the largest one fit in here? It will. I also have metal shaping cups that I use if they're any larger than this, like this flower had to be shaped using a combination of the metal cups and the plastic quilling mold. And I also use a metal ball tool to turn this flat piece of paper into a round shape. So we put it in. I'll start with this larger. That's moving underneath of me. Okay, and what I will do is shape each petal probably in 3 different sized cups because I want it to be shaped really tightly. And one thing to take note of is if you have colored your paper with PanPastel and then you shape it in the quilling mold, there is going to be a little bit of color in here that you can just wipe out with a paper towel or baby wipe or whatever you use to clean your tools with. So I think that's about as round as I want it to be. So what I do is I start by applying kind of light pressure all the way around the surface. And the reason for doing that is to try to prevent some major, where it folds the whole thing in half. And so if you go from one cup to another, you just get a lot better looking creases. And some people will complain that they can't do this without folding the paper. And it's impossible to do without folding the paper. The paper is going to fold. That's the only way you're going to go from flat to this round shape. But when you put it all together, it really adds to making it look like a realistic flower. It adds texture that if it's just a smooth piece of paper, it doesn't look as natural. So it does look a little messy in the middle of the process, but that's okay. And it takes practice. I have made a lot of these flowers, so I know how and where to apply pressure. And oftentimes when people make them for the first time, they're kind of timid about messing up the cutout layers that they're working with. And there's no way to do it without getting pretty firm with your petals. Let's see, almost done with this whole layer. Okay, so there's one layer of petals shaped. I'll do each one and then we go in and do some more shaping in the center of these. And these were shaped much more than this. I probably didn't take each of these layers into 3 separate cups of the shaping mold. Okay. Once you get the hang of it, you can go through these pretty quickly. These aren't so bad. One of the flowers I want to do in a live soon for you is a giant peony. So it's just like this flower, but much, much larger. And making those flowers make these seem like an absolute piece of cake. It's not that they're difficult. It's just, it's a little bit of a workout because you have to press so much more paper into very round shapes, and it takes a bit of work, but it makes for some beautiful giant flowers where you can make a really pretty grouping for a nursery wall. That's what I would like to do next. Okay, now these first 2 layers were exactly the same size, and this one is just a little bit smaller. Let's see. I think it will start in the second shaping cup, so it'll be 1, 2, 3 in order to get it shaped where I want it. I might go down to a little smaller size metal ball tool. And when it gets down to that third one, you really have to stuff it in there. Let's see, I'll try to see if you're able to see what I'm doing, but that gives us a nice, very round. It pretty much fills up that cup with the paper. I often will start with a larger metal ball tool, and then as I'm getting down into the smaller sizes, it is easier to switch to a smaller ball. And now we'll go into the smallest one, and I do have to kind of press it down in. It's not going to want to go in. It's not going to just fall in by itself. It has to be pressed down in, but it's not, doesn't take too much force, but it does have to be stuffed in there. And I tried some different weights with the giant flowers. And if it's any heavier than this, it is just too difficult to work with. Whereas with these smaller flowers, you can make these with a text weight paper, and they hold their shape well. But when you get into the bigger ones, you want at least this weight of paper and not anymore. I started one flower with I forget the weight of it, but much heavier than this, and I did not finish it because it was a definite no. On our last petal, okay, so I've got these 3 layers here, and I want to draw them up tight like this flower here. Everything has been pulled up pretty tightly. Let's see, I guess we lost our view of these guys. So what I do is take one of the smaller metal ball tools. I'm not going with the smallest, but you apply pressure at the base of a petal and draw it toward the center. And do that with each petal. And with this size, I mean, it almost instantly just turns itself into a little ball. And I like to arrange it so that they evenly overlap. So this side of the petal will always be on top of the next side. And I do that all the way around. And then you can come in and apply firm pressure in a circle in the middle. And it just brings it right up. And if you don't overlap the petals evenly, they kind of get hung up on themselves and it just gets more difficult to do. Now, it doesn't have to be that tight, but if I just do that with all of them, it will come in the way I want it to. Okay, so overlap each of them. And paper has a grain to it, and so sometimes it will take on an oblong shape just because the paper has a grain running through it in one direction, and it will want to naturally bend more in one direction than the other. And then this is our smallest one. I think I'm going to use a smaller tool to draw it toward the center and evenly overlap. I guess it already is. And apply that circular pressure in the middle, kind of like giving it a little swirly. And now I've got these 3 round layers, and I'm going to assemble them on a DIY paper flower tool. Let's see, I've got the sepals here. In order to shape those, I just do a simple ribbon curl, put the stick on top, finger underneath, and apply pressure, and it just curls right up. Let's see, I don't have a wire cut for this. Let me get a little wire. I've got some bind wire here. This was a bad batch where the wire's loose. I think it was a knockoff roll that I got on Amazon. After that one, I learned to always check and make sure there isn't a lot of exposed wire, because it's almost impossible to work with if the wire's exposed. And in my experience, the real Oasis bind wire doesn't come out like that. So I'm just going to put a little bit of the bind wire up through that hole, add a tiny dot of glue, and then I will build on top of this and fold that over on top of the glue. And then I've got this wired for whatever I want to do with it in the future. So I'm going to build on here, start by putting some glue down, add a layer of petals through that center hole, and then apply pressure either with tweezers, or you can also apply pressure with the shaping sticks. That's a good way to get down inside there. And because these are already pulled up so tightly, I will probably just add glue on this side. Just go around the circle. You want to keep the glue close to that circle, because if you put the glue farther out, it kind of will try to undo the tight ball that you've made. It kind of will want to pull itself open. So you really want to keep the glue close to the circle. Okay, one more. Whoops, I got glue on you. And I'll have to open this up to get it inside there. And I'll use the pointy parts to go in there and stick it in place. Okay, yes, I definitely like this better than the open bloom. I just think it, especially since they're supposed to look like they're just starting to open up, I like for it to be tighter like that. This glue that I'm using, Art Glitter Glue, dries clear with a fine metal tip. It grabs a hold really fast. So you don't want to take it off of the flower tool until you know it has a good hold. But I know this is good enough, because the next thing I'm going to do is attach the center that we rolled up. I will pull the bits out a little bit to shape it. I'm just going to open it a little bit. I don't really need to do much of that with this because this is so tightly shaped, you hardly even see it inside there. When they're more open, I think it's more important to add a little more work to shaping that and fluffing that out a little bit. So what I will do for the center is hold it with tweezers, add a good bit of glue to the bottom, open this up, and place it inside in the middle. Hold it in place for just a few seconds, however long it takes for your glue to grab. And I know when I made the other one, I gave it a good scrunch. And that was how I got more the look of it just starting to open up. And I like how that looks. So now I've got these two mini buds. I'm doing this in replace of that one. And then here's a full flower. And we've got the little bud made out of one layer. So that is how I color and shape a mini bloom from my Ball Peony SVG.